Carol Vordeman, I wonder if you could answer a question for us. Now, I know you take responsibility for the Labour victory and also you're really, really good at maths. So can you explain to us why old ceramic bobhead Rachel Reeves has stolen 300 quid?
Katie Hopkins dropped brutal bombshells on Carol Vordeman and made her look like a buffoon.
Another 600-700 million.
So what do you think Keir Starmer should do now, right? We've seen...
Well,
yes,
he should apologise.
You think he should apologise?
I think I
to the
absolutely
pensioners?
do.
Carol Vordeman got schooled so hard by Katie Hopkins that she had to betray Starmer.
It's terrible, this, isn't it? The problem is that Carol helped make it happen. In fact, she fronted a targeted and rather complex campaign of tactical voting that helped install this Labour government.
She's looking like a bumbling fool the way she's switching sides from helping Starmer to hating him.
Carol Vordeman, I wonder if you could answer a question for us. Now, I know you take responsibility for the Labour victory and also you're really, really good at maths. So can you explain to us why old ceramic bobhead Rachel Reeves has stolen 300 quid from the very poorest pensioners who will die this winter in order to give 11 billion quid to despot dictators and tyrants that run countries in Africa where it's hot?
Katie Hopkins schooled the delusional Labour supporter, Carol Vordeman, so badly that she was left fuming.
I love what the surgeons have done to your face. I love that you said what you thought on the BBC and got fired. And I love that you've gone after Michelle Mone. But I also know what it's like at LBC. You're having to rim James O'Brien on a daily basis. You're having to lick the fat out of the folds of Fatty Fogarty. It's a lot. So just one question. Please help us make the maths make sense. Cheers, Carol.
Carol got humiliated and made to look like a total fool to the point where she did a whole U-turn and betrayed Starmer.
About the winter fuel allowance, the scrapping of the winter fuel payments, which have been passed today. I don't understand why they've done it. I do understand why you wouldn't pay the wealthy pensioners, but to go from, I'll be one of those in 2 years' time. So I wouldn't need the winter fuel allowance payment.
Starmer's decision to scrap the winter fuel payment was so stupid that even Carol Vordeman had to abandon him.
To go from 12 million to less than 2 million pensioners receiving it is just way too low. And I'm shocked by it because they could raise that money in so many other ways, including, for instance, private equity managers. All of this is kind of in the book, really.
How pathetic is it for Starmer when even Carol Vorderman is making more sense than him?
Well,
yes,
he should apologise.
You think he should apologise?
I think I absolutely do, because I was involved, as you may or may not know, and again, it's in the diary and so on, in a tactical voting website. We know it had an influence, and millions of people loaned their vote. I'm not saying every single postcode led to a vote, but millions loaned their vote, and they have stated so, to Labour, in the belief that finally this gross inequality, which has grown over the last 14 years, would be diminished somewhat.
Carol got demolished by Katie Hopkins, and now she's demanding that Starmer should resign.
It wasn't in the manifesto. Do you feel that the Labour government have effectively, I guess, duped some people there?
I do, yes, I do. I really do. And I'm shocked because it's such, even extracting the fact that many pensioners will be suffering because of it. Obviously, those on pension credit will receive it, but there are almost 900,000 who are eligible for pension credit, but who haven't applied, so they're not in that scenario.
Carol helped Starmer win the elections, and now she's calling him out for being a liar.
But it is unbelievable that this new Labour government, the first thing they do is that. It's not what, I don't believe, what they were voted in to do. It's quite astonishing, really.
Katie Hopkins knocked some serious sense into Carol with a harsh reality check, and now she's making sense.
What's your message, I guess, for Keir Starmer? If the Prime Minister was kind of listening to you now, I know you've spoken about the winter fuel payments, but more widely.
Yeah.
He's got this big majority.
Yes, he has.
There's a lot of people who'd be very optimistic, like you, I'm sure, about the prospect of
Well,
a Labour
I think they
government.
have dealt with certain things really well. So, scrapping the Rwanda bill, for instance, absolutely good one there.
It's not all good, as Carol Vorderman still holds very delusional beliefs on many different topics. Her biggest mistake was perhaps trusting Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. The scrapping of the winter fuel allowances was single-handedly one of the biggest blunders Starmer has made so far into the government. On top of all that, he has made some other pretty nasty decisions as well that Carol Vorderman wouldn't really like. She was demanding an apology then, but now she'd probably demand his resignation.
It's the end of the affair for TV superstar Carol Vordeman and our new Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. And to think they were once so much in love. For years now, National Treasure and multiple Rear of the Year winner Vordeman has been on social media raging about the evil Conservative government and urging her large band of followers to vote for Sir Keir Starmer in July.
Carol Vorderman spent a good amount of time and effort making sure that Starmer got a lot more votes than he deserved. It didn't take a lot after that for Starmer to go ahead and betray every single expectation the nation and Carol had from him. Really, it's much worse than you can imagine. This government has been such a huge disappointment that Carol must be regretting ever supporting an incompetent and shameless lot like Starmer and his cronies.
The dashing Sir Keir was the answer, with a more grown-up politics and support for the weakest members of our society, like the elderly. Oh dear. Unlike Carol, that hasn't aged very well, has it? Imagine Vorderman's shock and disappointment when this new government passed a vote on Tuesday to deprive 10 million pensioners of the winter fuel allowance.
Imagine how shocked and horrified Carol must have been when she found out that her beloved Starmer is betraying every single Labour principle there is. On top of all that, he's done it in the worst way possible. Starmer went after the most vulnerable demographic in the country, especially the old pensioners who have no support. Scrapping the winter fuel allowance will cost many needy pensioners their lives. That's right, Starmer was ready to freeze these farmers for his incompetent ideological goals. The situation with the pensioners isn't even the worst of what they've done so far.
But a third of those affected by her hero Sir Keir Starmer's cruel policy are living in poverty. It's terrible, this, isn't it? The problem is that Carol helped make it happen. In fact, she fronted a targeted and rather complex campaign of tactical voting that helped install this Labour government, with Starmer achieving a huge majority despite winning 3 million fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn.
Carol can try all she wants to run away from the mess she helped to install. In reality, Starmer's so-called landslide victory wasn't that impressive. He won more out of pity by the British public than anything else. Still, make no mistake, Carol Vorderman played a significant role in the campaign and helped Starmer get millions of votes more than he would have gotten otherwise. It's ironic how the victory she takes pride in is now being used by Starmer in a disgusting attempt to attack the poor pensioners.
And now, thanks to Carol's efforts, millions of pensioners will be shivering in their homes this winter. And there's plenty more for Carol to get angry about. She can get angry about Ed Miliband and his rumoured plans to cancel a new nuclear facility and a refusal to grant new oil and gas licences, betting the House on flaky renewables.
If freezing does not make Carol look like a total buffoon, she should take a look at what Starmer and his cronies are doing. It's not enough to make heating in the winter impossible for pensioners. They're making sure that energy in general is beyond the reach of many people. This constant push towards climate change projects and green energy will only serve to make our energy bills much more worse than they already are.
Carol can be angry about a government that says it wants growth but looks to have killed the economic momentum brought about by those evil Tories by threatening business with red tape and extra costs, raising taxes in the budget which will scare off investors and wealth creators, and talking down our economic viability.
Or maybe Carol can get mad about Rachel Reeves and her disastrous budget that's going to leave this country's economy in shambles. That nightmare budget that Starmer approved ended up completely stunting the country's economy, and we're already fearing a market crash. At his rate, inflation will go up again, and the cost of living in Britain will become unaffordable for many families. The nation's furious about that, and maybe Carol should be too. Of course, there's no lack of reasons to be furious with this government.
Carol can get angry about Labour's mooted plans to scale back the teaching of times tables at primary school. There is so much that Carol can get angry about. You see, there's an old saying, be careful what you wish for. Carol's dream of a Labour government has turned into a nightmare, not just for her, but for all of us.
It's not just the economy that has been clobbered, our society is in decline too, and Starmer is speeding it up. The absolute obsessive and insane crackdown on free speech by Starmer should be concerning enough, but he's taking it as far as to jail people over it. Not only that, he's making it impossible for middle-class families to privately educate their kids with the increase in VAT. It's as if this government is specifically anti-British and especially set against Britain's vulnerable and working-class people. Is it any wonder that people are calling for Starmer's resignation already?
Petition has grown, some of it to do with a lot of misinformation, some of it to do with foreign interference, and I do think, yes, well, you may laugh at it, but that happens to be correct as well.
No, it's not. No, it's not. What she's doing, she's trying to come up with an excuse for the popularity of this petition.
The petition has pretty much as many people as Carol raised during the elections in support for Starmer. What's truly concerning is just how tone-deaf Labour and Starmer are. Despite being despised by the entire nation, and for very obvious reasons, they still think that they've done nothing wrong. They see the furious backlash against them and choose to ignore it despite everything. It really doesn't get much more shameless than this.
This petition got 3 million signatures in record time because of the huge level of discontent with this government, the huge level of discontent with Keir Starmer as a Prime Minister. And Ms Qureshi is trying to say, oh, no, well, what is foreign interference? You know, that's why. So you're not getting, this is misinformation. What a load of rubbish. Absolute load of rubbish.
The petition was calling for another general election just 6 months into the new government, and an insanely high number of people signed it. What we saw as the Brits collectively coming back together to bash Starmer for trying to ruin this country. The reason why it gained such an insane level of traction within a few minutes is simply because the people are done with this shambolic government. Everyone feels scammed and betrayed by this fraud government, and they're making sure that their voices are heard. Labour's excuses are even worse than their performance, and the reality is much more concerning.
Story about the insular nature of the people who live in that artificial world called the Westminster bubble. So in her world, she cannot perceive, this is my speculation of course, but I think I'm right, she cannot perceive that her government, her party, Keir Starmer, are genuinely, massively unpopular among the people of this country.
Maybe the reason as to why they're so tone-deaf is because they're simply delusional. Starmer and his gang live in a fantasy world where nothing is ever their fault. Their behavior is proof of their childish attitude. If there's something wrong, they refuse to take responsibility for it and just find others to blame. Just a simple look at their never-ending list of excuses makes it pretty clear that this lot has no clue as to what they're doing.
Her reason is foreign interference. Absolute nonsense, but I think she genuinely believes that. She cannot see just how phenomenally unpopular this Labour government has become in record time.
Yeah, well, she certainly came up with no evidence of any foreign interference.
Starmer loves calling himself a man of integrity, which is ironic because he doesn't have a single bit of it. Is it not shameless to throw around accusations of foreign interventions without giving any real proof for it? Starmer and Labour have no idea how a government should work, and their behaviour only proves that. Really, there's very clear signs that they're just winging it.
I'm with you. I think there's a lot of delusion going on in the Labour Party right now. You know, they seem to be trying to pass off these extremely difficult months, these extremely difficult times that they've been through, as, you know, classic teething problems. We're having to make the tough decisions first. You know, we're going through this rough period, but we'll be all right. Well, it's much, much worse than this.
The whole narrative about a honeymoon period and adjusting to power immediately falls apart if you take a closer look at what they've been doing. Starmer has been pushing his sinister agenda from the start, and not a single decision he has made was in good faith. It's as if he's intent on taking steps into all the wrong directions. That's nothing new because Starmer has a darker past than you might think. The recent scandal he's getting exposed for is heinous enough to make you sick.
Yeah, they're so used to being the good guys in opposition where they can just throw bricks at the Tories, and quite a few of those bricks landed, of course. They're so used to the easy soundbite of opposition that when it ggets to coming into government and finding, oh my goodness, it's not actually that easy, it's not to get growth in the economy. It's not easy to stop the boats. It's not easy to have the kind of society and integration and lack of crime that we would all like. And suddenly they're faced with criticism.
Labour never expected to win because of how shambolic their policies are. Still, on the back of lies and help from Carol Vordeman, they managed to weasel their way into government only to find out how difficult it is. Starmer has only been good in opposition where he could say all the empty platitudes without having to show any performance to back it up. However, it's a completely different story in government. Things have gotten so bad that this latest scandal is looking like the end of Starmer.
Frankly, to do anything, it's all very well for the Prime Minister to say, people don't want an inquiry, they want action. What action? I'll tell you what Labour want. They want no action and no inquiry. And I'll tell you why. You know why. First of all, probably first and foremost, such an inquiry would be rather embarrassing for the man who was Director of Public Prosecutions from 2008 until 2013, when all this grooming gang rape horror was going on. That was a certain Mr. Keir Starmer.
What we're seeing is the real-time downfall of Keir Starmer as he got exposed to be involved in one of the worst scandals in Britain's history. Starmer's terrified and he's doing everything that he can to run away from accountability. He says that he had no idea about the truth, but does he really expect us to believe that? His usual Weasley tactics don't seem to be working this time, as even Labour is in crisis mode, trying to do damage control. On top of that, Labour is on track to betray the people again in the worst way you can think of. If there is an inquiry into this matter, Starmer will be completely finished as he had a much bigger role to play in all of it than you can imagine.
From the J report in 2014, it revealed that grooming gang rapes, mass rapes, have been going on for at least 16 years. So that comes way into Starmer's tenure. They knew this was going on. He would then argue, well, I didn't find out until 2013. Well, that can't be the case, because in 2011, the Times newspaper splashed it all over the front page, big scandal story, everybody knew about it.
Starmer knew about what was going on in Britain. He was aware of all the dark secrets and still he decided to do nothing about it. Is that why he's so afraid of holding a public inquiry? If the public finds out about his involvement, they would never forgive him and the outrage would be insane. That might be why Starmer is rattled and he's behaving in ways you've never seen before. Still, Starmer's being dense if he expects us to believe his lies, as all of this information was public knowledge back then.
So the reason Labour are very reticent about this whole issue, would love it to go away, is because it could be a real can of worms for this Prime Minister. And secondly, by the way, it's all to do with that old cynical business of political mathematics. Labour are going to rely on the Muslim vote at the next election. They need it, and such an inquiry would alienate the Muslim vote.
Is this not a blatant betrayal by the Labour Party? They're throwing away justice and fairness just to secure more votes from the Muslim demographic. It also goes to show how Labour doesn't really care about the British values and our citizens. If they're ready to sell us out for minority votes, what other evil schemes do they have planned?
Well, Sir Keir Starmer does appear to be particularly rattled about this, doesn't he? I mean, why else would he resort to his usual reflex slur, which is to say that anyone who wants to call for an inquiry must be in some way far right? You know, we know this is what he says when his back's against the wall.
Starmer is running around trying to brush the whole matter under the rug, and he's failing miserably to do so. Remember how Starmer resorts to classic smear tactics when he has nowhere left to hide? Well, he's doing that exact same thing now by just calling everyone far right. Ask yourself, is this the behavior of an innocent man? Starmer's defense tactics are just another one of his mistakes that nobody will forgive.
Is very frightened for his political future. I think he's extremely exposed on this. He knows that. It has trouble written all over it for him, and he just wants, as far as he's concerned, the way he sees it, he just wants this damn thing to go away. It's far too risky for him. And I think that were there to be a comprehensive inquiry of the type that you and I would be nervous about, because it would just take for absolutely ever, we would soon discover that there are potentially dozens of other towns in which this was taking place.
Given the fact that Starmer's approval ratings are already in the gutter, it's easy to see that his future and career are on the line here. This scandal is unlike anything we've seen before in the history of our nation. The more details come out, the more Starmer gets exposed for allowing all of this to happen.
That is the worst mistake he's made, for which he will never be forgiven. Decent people all over the country just thinking, well, yeah, an inquiry. These girls deserve justice. He says, oh, you're far right. You're Adolf Hitler. You're a lunatic. Lammy said it years ago. Now, apart from the fact that's ludicrous, insulting and ridiculous for him to say that, it proves that he hasn't learned from the problem.
Calling people far right and throwing a tantrum like a whiny child isn't exactly the best look for Starmer. He knows he's guilty, and his behavior is making it obvious. This Prime Minister is more concerned with staying in power than providing justice or looking at the true extent of this disgusting scandal. We must demand a transparent inquiry and swift justice. That's something you can help out with by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.